I'm just gonna listen because I'm working on my breath, so hopefully I say it loud enough. But heart, a street parable of courage. When someone is known to be strong in the streets, they say that nigga got a lot of heart. It doesn't mean he's the toughest dude out there. It just means he has the will and the courage to do something difficult, even if it's just surviving. If he got beat down, he came back up. He got a lot of heart. But another way of putting that is to say that his soul is large. This relates to the Heart Sutra, one of the shortest but most important sutras in the Buddhist writings. It's from the sutras known as the Perfection of Wisdom, and it's only a paragraph long. But you might look at it like the illest rap verse ever spit. Simple, tight, and incomparably profound. Mostly the Heart Sutra is about being able to see reality as it truly is, unclouded by the things human beings project onto it. Read it differently in different translations, but to me, it's about knowing yourself. It's about trusting your heart, real heart, not your ego, to show you the truth. It's about that spark of God inside you. It's a lesson that I learned many years ago when I was a kid in Staten Island. When I was 13, the toughest guy in my age bracket was a guy they called Jun Jun. Jun Jun matured early. Physically, he was a man by 8th grade, and he was also a knockout artist, a bad dude no one wanted to fuck with. Unfortunately for me, one of the few dudes that did fight him was my older brother Divine, who beat him. So when I met Jun Jun a year later in junior high, we had an automatic beef, a sins of the father situation. Jun Jun wanted to try me. In 7th grade, I was one of those dudes who was always going to go for it. Win or lose, I'm going for it every time. So we had a fight, and I have to say, he beat me. Put it this way, when you gotta bite a nigga to get up, that means you lost. I wound up moving to Brooklyn for a year or two, and then moved back to Staten Island for high school. And in my first week back in the school, who do I run into? Jun Jun. He was even still with his same little homeboy he been hanging with 2 years ago. A little instigating motherfucker. This little dude said June. Remember him? Remember him? He's that nigga that bit you that one time. So June came up to me and was like, "What up, boy?" By this time, I was 14 and had knowledge of myself. And if a man truly knows himself, he also knows his enemy. He knows that even if his enemy is a giant, that giant still has the same weakness within him. I think that's why the yin and yang has two dots, one on each side. The dot in your opposite, in this case, the bully, is his weak spot. The more knowledge of self you have, the better chance you have of finding that little dot within him. Because that dot is the you in him. It's like Jesus says in the Bible. How is that you can see the mote in your brother's eyes and not see the beam in your own? The giant is bullying you for no reason other than he sees something in you that he sees in himself. On some level, I perceive that within infinite. So when he challenged me, I came back with him. I came back at him saying, "I ain't no boy, man." His calling me that meant we had to fight again. This time it happened in McKee Park on on Staten Island, between the two high schools, McKee and Curtis. In a way, they're Wu-Tang feeder schools. In a way, they're Wu-Tang feeder schools. You, God, went to McKee. I went to Curtis. June and I walked 4 blocks to fight in McKee Park with the crowd following us. This time, we must have fought for hours. Nobody wins a fight like that. Even though we were only in 9th grade, this was a real fight between two men. There were blood, cuts, the kind of wounds that don't heal. It ended with him having 2 rocks in his hand. Not a fair fight, if it ever was, and me still not backing down. The fight was over when neither of us could move. In this case, you would say that we both had heart. I had heart for defending my honor, because in the streets, that's all you have. I couldn't beat this guy. He was probably lifting 200 pounds by this time, but he could not beat me without killing me. I showed heart. And in this case, I showed enough heart that June wound up becoming my student. Soon after this, he found mathematics, took the name Infinite, and began to study with me. I like to think that my heart wanted his respect so I could teach him. That's the good side of heart. But there's a dark side to heart, and that's ego. That part of heart ended up defeating Infinite. In a year or two, Infinite became known throughout Staten Island as a tough dude and an egomaniac. A lot of guys that hung with me from Park Hill and Stapleton didn't like him. Infinite was from New Brighton, and a lot of neighborhood wars were started by him and his brother. Mathematics had calmed him down a bit, but he was still knocking niggas out left and right. And that's just a little excerpt from the book, the Tao Of Wu, Tao Of Wu, Tao Of Wu.